After e4, c5, knight f6, white plays d4. So after the pawn takes, as we've seen in previous videos, we have to take with the queen, and that's going to create a bunch of forced moves. So we're attacking the rook, and the bishop cannot play to g7. So after knight f6, we have to attack the knight with the pawn. The best move by black is knight f6. Of course, moving the knight anywhere else doesn't make much sense. Also because we have threats of e6, discovered attack on the rook, creating weakness in f7. So we all know that. After knight c6 and queen a, as we've seen in the previous videos, if you haven't watched them yet, go and watch them through my channel. The knight goes now to d5 and queen to b3. So we went through moves like e6 previously. And as you know, it creates a lot of problems for black. So let's go through this move now. Knight d to b4. The knight is protected by the knight in c6. So how to punish this move? Bishop to d2, there's double attack on the knight, and after the most active move, which is a5, white continues with development, so knight c3. And after bishop to g7, there's two attackers over e5, but we play a3 first, so black will have to prioritize the piece. So after knight to a6 only move, white continues with bishop e3. We ignore the pawn because we're threatening bishop to b6. So white's already winning here. Two moves we're going to look at now. The best move by black is castling, which will allow the queen space to go to e8. And we'll see what happens if black takes the pawn. So if black takes the pawn, for example, that's a loss. Because bishop b6, the queen is trapped. Only move by black to save the queen is knight back to c7, but then knight d5. And even if the knight hadn't gone to c7, but knight had started with a check, for example, then we have to take the knight, obviously, and now black's idea of playing bishop e5, which puts more protection over c7. Well, of course, this has to come after knight c7, right? After knight c7, white plays knight to d5 again, so we have double attack on c7, and after bishop to e5, which was the whole idea behind knight takes f3, pawn takes f3, so that the bishop will have a space in e5 to help protect c7. This doesn't help because knight takes c7 anyway, and then after bishop takes, queen c3 completes the masterpiece because there's an attack on the rook and double attack on the bishop. So let's make a recap so that we familiarize with all the moves. g6 is not the best the best defense for black. d4, and after take, attack on the rook, knight f6, we attack the knight. Knight c6, we move the queen to a4. The attack on the knight remains whilst the queen stays on this rank, so we cover the square g4. And after knight d5 and queen b3, in this video we're starting with knight to b4. We attack it more with the bishop. After a5, we develop the knight to c3. Bishop g7, there's double attack on the pawn. We attack the knight. We force the knight to an uncomfortable square, which is a6. And now bishop e3. Also because the knight might have wanted to go to c5, the bishop e3 is covering everything. It's attacking b6 and attacking c5. So after black castles, we still play bishop b6, which is a move that would have come anyway. Oh, and by the way, instead of castling, if the black player plays b5, which looks nice because it will give space for the rook to attack in case we take the pawn, and it's also stopping the whole bishop b6 idea, then here we just develop and take the pawn, and after the rook attacks the bishop and pins it, we can play queen to c4 with a double attack on the knight. So after knight moves to c7, we can take the knight here. White is just so much better. Pawn takes back, and now knight to d4, threatening a fork. And the white player's position is evaluated +4, something like that. White is so much better. If black takes the pawn here in b2, the best move by white is castling long. And the king is attacking the rook, so white is completely winning. If rook goes back to protect the square in c6, we're still going to make this move. The queen can't really move it. She's trapped. So yeah, let's go back. In this position, we mentioned that b5 doesn't work. So after castling, bishop to b6 is coming. At this time, the queen has space to go to e8. How to punish this? Well, white will castle long side now. Development is complete and it's perfect. Black pieces are stuck. They can't move. This bishop cannot be developed. The pawn cannot advance because you can just take it for free, right? There's no compensation. So for example, a pawn pusher, then take, and then rook takes. white is just so much better. In this position, the white player has a plan of playing rook to e1 to protect the pawn further, and then nothing stops white from playing h4, h5, and so on. Black has no attacking chances from the queen side. He can't move his pieces on the queen side, and moving his pawns on the king side will just make the king side weaker, whilst white king is so much safer. So before white protects the pawn in e1 and keeps black paralyzed, what happens if black takes the pawn in e5? This is a big problem because knight takes, which also it makes sense to take that pawn because it's a free pawn, and also it will allow the black player to play, I don't know, d6, maybe d5, normal moves, maybe e6, and so on, and develop the light square bishop. Also get a queen able to go somewhere. But now this is lost because knight takes, and then after bishop takes back, white now plays knight to d5 with the threat of f4. And most importantly, the knight is putting pressure in e7. So when the bishop is out, we can play one of the rooks to the e file. So if black, for example, attacks the knight with e6, you can play f4. And you can continue the game with the bishop pair. And so white's position is much more favorable. If black saves the bishop, then you can go on with bishop to b5, developing the last bishop, and then play rook h to e1 to pin this pawn. The black queen cannot move anywhere. So let's just see a line before we close this video. So here we are, after knight to d5. If black plays d6, which seems logical, also allows the queen some hope of going out somewhere. Again, white plays bishop to b5, attacking the queen. The queen is trapped, so after bishop to d7, it looks like the black player might be able to play a normal game after a few swaps, and maybe black can start breathing, but even then we're winning. Bishop takes, queen takes, and now rook h to e1. We're threatening to win the bishop, because if pawn takes, knight f6 is a fork, and then you can take the queen. So, well, bishop g7 doesn't work because knight e7, it's just black is falling apart, completely winning. And then if black bishop instead of g7 goes to f6, then beautiful move, queen to f3, threatening to win the bishop for free, because if pawn takes, knight makes a fork and takes the queen again. After the best move, which is queen to a4, position is lost anyway, but still, black plays this beautiful move, rook e7, and now we're threatening to take the bishop. Of course, taking the rook doesn't work because knight check. If king goes to h8, you got a check here, and that's game over. And if king goes to g7, then the best move, according to the engine, is rook to d6, because it puts more pressure over f6, since we know that the black player is wanting to play pawn to f6 and put more defense over f6. After rook to d6, black's got no checks, and nothing stops white from playing bishop d4. So after f6, bishop to d4, and white wins. From the start, after knight f3 and g6, d4, pawn takes, queen takes with an attack on the rook, knight f6, pawn attacks the knight, knight c6 attacking the queen moves away, knight to d5 and queen to b3. We've seen this move throughout these videos. What happens after knight to b6? Black doesn't really compromise his own pawn structure, and this move is actually fairly solid. White continues with bishop to f4. Develop the bishop and protect the pawn since it's going to be attacked again. Bishop to now knight to c3, developing. And after castle, white castles long. So this time the black players played the most solid moves, and he has managed to get out of the opening normally. So let's have a look at a few ideas how to continue here, more or less, how it looks like. How to meet this move. Knight to a5, attacking the queen. This is actually a mistake, because now white plays queen a3, attacking the knight. And this move, which I've encountered personally, it just doesn't work. It looks like black is approaching, so knight b to c4, attacking the queen, is met by queen to a4. So now we have two pieces attacking the knight, and black cannot do anything about it. So that's just a blunder. The best move now for black is a6 with the threat of b5. The reason is that after our best move, which is bishop takes, black now plays this b5 move, and it's forking these two pieces, so should be able to re-win a piece, in which case our best move is bishop takes, pawn takes, and then queen takes. And so white is up 2 pawns. Let's see how to consolidate the advantage until the end game, and then we can close this. Bishop a6 with development is not possible because simply queen to d7, white is winning. The rook cannot go to b8 because it gets taken. So after knight goes back to c6, for instance, white continues with perfect end of development. Rook h2 e1. How to consolidate this? Rook to b8 attacking the queen, queen to c5, just getting out of the way. So after bishop to b7, black is attempting to finishing development, but again, this is just a lost game. I'm just showing how to consolidate the advantage. White is up 2 pawns and will win the game because of the passed pawns. White continues with knight to d5, and the idea of creating weaknesses on the dark squares. So bishop g5 is coming. Any attempt of black to go and simplify the game will just favor white, of course, so it wouldn't make sense. A move like e6 is thematic. You've seen this in previous videos too, in other setups as well, not just against this type of Sicilian. Bishop to g5 attacks the queen. f6 is not possible because you can just take it. After queen to e8, then knight f6 check, attacking the queen and the king. So the bishop has to take, and now bishop takes back. White has a plan of playing queen e3 and then queen h6. It's unstoppable. Black will have to give up a lot of material. So from the start, after e4, c5, knight f3, g6, d4, take with the queen, knight f6, e5 attacks the knight, knight c6, queen a4, knight goes out, queen b3, and now knight b6. We're going to continue with bishop f4, protecting the pawn, bishop g7, knight c3, and after castle, long castle. Earlier we went through the idea of knight a5, it doesn't work. So what happens after d5? I've encountered this move. Either way, if black plays d5 or d6, also because we've already gone through moves like e6, we kind of know what to do already. So here we take en passant, and after the best move by black, which is bishop to e6, which comes with a tempo on the queen, and then black will be able to recapture the material later on. White plays queen to a3. We're going to look at two moves before we close this video. One of them is knight to c4, attacking the queen. Best move, bishop takes. And now queen to c5 attacks the bishop. And after the bishop goes back, it's game over. Also, well, the bishop was being attacked. So pawn takes, and now there's an attack on the queen. The queen takes back because the rook was attacking it, so you couldn't take back with the knight. But now bishop to d6 will do. So in this position, we went through knight c4, doesn't work. What happens after simply pawn takes? Well, then now bishop takes, and there's an attack on the rook. So after rook e8, the bishop goes back to e5, there's an attack on the queen, and after the best move, which is queen e7, we can now swap. There's two ways to take back, either with the rook or with the knight. Either way, white will have an advantage. So after rook takes, now bishop takes, king takes, and now knight to d4. Let's not forget that white has a pawn advantage. Knight d4 is simply trying to simplify the game for white. Also, it's an open game, so white might think of giving up the knight for that bishop. What happens, let's just see how the endgame will look like. Knight takes, rook takes, and then white is simply going on with normal development and play with the extra pawn. Apparently, the best move by black is rook to d7, and yeah, white simply goes on with rook takes, knight takes, and then bishop to e2, and white should win because of the majority on the queen side. This is, by the way, the line where the black player played the best moves. So, of course, this endgame doesn't look as easy as the previous examples, all the many lines that we've seen so far where white just got a crashing advantage every single time. It's because this g6 Sicilian defense is actually a bad one, although it's extremely popular. The last variation we saw, rook takes queen. What happens if knight takes? Again, it's very similar. We're winning, so bishop takes, king takes. And now bishop to b5 attacking the rook. The rook moves. And now again knight to d4. Threatening to take the bishop and isolating the pawn, making things even easier for white. So after bishop to d7, let's see this other type of move. The bishop goes to e2, best move by white. It's an open game, so you want to keep your bishop. And now there's just too many different things that black can do, so it would be impossible to go through everything. But yeah, we got our advantage and we're going to play a favorable endgame. It's pointless now. There's just too many things that black might choose to do, but it's just losing. Let's just look at this line from a game that actually happened to me. Black played this move. It was a blitz game, so easy win for me, although I didn't find this move. But still, I'm just going to tell you, pretending that I did find it. Anyway, knight takes, and now bishop f3 attacking the knight. and also taking the pawn in b7. Defending a knight doesn't work, simply because now rook to d2, and white is going to double up the rooks and is going to win material. Black cannot do anything right now. For example, rook to d7, preparing to double up as well, then rook to e1, winning another pawn, right? There's double attack on e6. King f6, desperately, doesn't matter. Knight takes, pawn takes, and then beautiful sacrifice. Rook takes, king takes, and now bishop to g4 wins for white. If instead of rook to d7, black plays rook to b8, preparing to defend the pawn so that he won't lose more material. That's too late because now white can double up the rooks. The white player is preparing a discovered check and the whole attack on d5. So after rook to f8, again knight takes, pawn takes, and then bishop takes, pawn takes, and white is completely winning after the simple move f3, stopping the rook from reaching the second rank. And there's going to be a free pawn.